Okay. Streaming is not, what does Emily D. Baker say? Streaming is not dynamic. It is dynamic. It's always changing. Okay. Hello and welcome to today's live stream. It is February 20th and it is our Thursday live stream. If you guys are new here, welcome to That's My Opinion, where we talk about today's biggest topics to spark honest conversations. And it was not chat, but it was commenter request that we talk about the OJ Simpson documentary that just got released on Netflix. So, hello, Madel. How are you? So I have two. I have a vertical live stream and I have our regular live stream. Hopefully everything goes well. We will see. It's always an adventure. So the comments, some commenters wanted me to take a look. So we did episode 1. Hi, everyone. Hi, Karen. How are you? I hope everyone makes it in okay and we're doing well. And also, just a real quick point, I might have to step out for a second to go help my brother-in-law do something, but we'll see. We'll see in a little bit. Hi, Topher. How are you? Welcome in, guys. So chat or comments asked me to watch the new OJ documentary, which is phenomenal. If you guys have watched it on Netflix, it is fantastic. I went back to the earlier live, so the reason I said I can only chat, because I was on a meeting. Yes. Well, I'm glad you're here now. So, with that being said, let's see. What just happened? Did this move? Oh, okay. Sorry. I watched all 4 episodes and I broke down each episode into its own video. And I have to tell you, this documentary is wonderful. I've also watched Made in America, which is about OJ, which is also another phenomenal documentary. This one, we get to have a little bit more insight from Christopher Darden. They talk a lot to Mark Furman. They talk to Tom Lang. And it is just all very interesting, very different perspectives. And it's just fantastic. I find it to be fantastic. So what I thought would be fun over the next 4 weeks, because I did break it down into 4 episodes, and then we'll be moving into the Gabby Petito documentary. One of the things that I thought would be fun or interesting is to take a look at the OJ trial with a fresh set of eyes. So that's what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to pull it up on YouTube. And we're just going to watch different testimonies together and break them down with a fresh set of eyes and see if we can go from there. Also, I thought it would be interesting if we went into the civil case and talked about the, the whole thing. They have the whole trial. Like, I would love to, oh my God, my live stream came up in search. Look at us. We're, what's it called? We're ranking. Look at us. Oh, this is so exciting. Okay, so let's watch it in chronological order. I will set us both up here. Oh, I was like, what am I hearing? Woo! Dang. Okay. Hold on, OJ.
All right, the record should reflect now that the defendant is present with counsel. You may be seated if you wish.
Okay.
And would counsel state their appearances for the record?
Good morning. Robert Shapiro and Sarah Bowman, Mr. Simpson.
And good morning, Your Honor. William Hodgman for the people.
Marcia Clark for the people. Good morning, Your Honor.
Marcia Clark for the people.
All right, there are a number of matters on calendar today. I think one matter that can be resolved in fairly short order.
See if I can get this.
And
there we go.
that relates to the hair sample that the court did grant an order for a hair sample. The
Move me a little bit.
defense submitted an order to the court requesting to limit that hair sample to 1 hair.
Who is this?
I did have my clerk contact the district attorney's office.
Oh, these are
determine
preliminary
whether they
hearings.
were
We don't want preliminary
agreement
hearings. Let's go
with that
to
order, and the indication was that they were not, and therefore I've
OJ
done
Simpson
nothing to
trial.
revert that order to this
Here we
point.
go. Opening statements. There he is, Judge Lance Ito.
Good morning, counsel. All right, back on the record in the Simpson matter. Mr. Simpson is again present before the court with his counsel, Mr. Ullman, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Douglas, Mr. Bailey, people represented by Ms. Clark, Mr. Darden, and Mr. Hodgman. All right, counsel, we have just a few matters to dispose of before we reach our opening statement stage.
Oh, there's Bill Hodgman. I don't know. if he had his...
Yesterday, the jurors, when they retired, one of the jurors handed the bailiffs a note for the court, and they were just curious as to whether or not the court was going to allow them to watch the Super Bowl this weekend, and I've indicated to them that yes, they can, and that we would arrange their visitation schedule accordingly. So I take it there's no comment on that.
Can we watch the Super Bowl, please?
Create a file for juror notes, please. All right, first issue to be resolved is the defense motion to allow Mr. Simpson to brief.
Oop.
Being in proximity while Mr. Simpson addresses a jury or displays his need.
All right. I'll hear from the people.
I'm going to put this playback speed on.
Thank you, and good morning, Your Honor. First of all, this is not an opening the counsel proposes. It's simply an attempt to capitalize on whatever defendant's star appeal currently is with the jury and to get him to have close proximity with them, to impress them. What is the probative value of a scar? What does it prove to this jury in terms of his physical capabilities on the night of June the 12th, 1994? It proves nothing. In fact, we all know that on the morning of June the 12th, he was playing golf. We also know that within weeks before the murder, he made an exercise video. So the probative value of that scar is nil, and the misleading nature of presenting that scar to the jury is great. The inference that the defense will seek to draw from that scar is that he was incapable of certain physical acts. If that is what they intend to present, that's fine. Let them present testimony that is capable of cross-examination. But to have the defendant essentially testify before the jury without taking the witness stand and being cross-examined is inappropriate.
Agree.
Cases in which the defendants have been able to address the jury in opening statement in previous occasions have been cases where the defendant was acting in pro per. This defendant is not in pro per. He is represented by many attorneys. If he desires to testify before this jury, then let him do so as all witnesses do, on the witness stand, and be subject to full and complete cross-examination.
Agree.
Case law is completely in favor of the people's position in this regard. People v. Perez, 216 Calap 3rd, 1346, in which the defendant requested to be allowed to exhibit his tattoos without being sworn or giving testimony. The court refused his request and ruled that the exhibition of the tattoo would be testimonial if offered, to impeach the testimony of an undercover officer, and essentially that's what the injuries now being proposed to be displayed to the jury is being offered to show, that he could not, in fact, commit certain acts that he is charged with committing. It's testimonial in nature. Let's make no mistake about that. What is the purpose otherwise of demonstrating the scar or of talking about or showing the jury what he can and cannot do? It's going to give him the ability to limp up to the jury box, get close to the jury, and try and impress them with his physical presence.
And as we know, OJ in the courtroom was a very good actor when he tried to like re-put on that glove. They did have him wearing a latex glove. And in this documentary, there is something that they touch on, which is Mike Gilbert, his agent or his ex-agent had told him like, which is so funny to me. Not funny, gross, but he's like, well, if you're worried that the glove's going to fit, then you should take your arthritis or not take your arthritis medicine. And he's like, well, if anyone interested in Court TV released a 25-part docuseries talking about each week of the trial. Topher, I did not know that. I would love to watch that. We should watch that together. Because I'm sure they have it here. But anyways, Mike Gilbert had told OJ, he's like, if you're worried about it, don't take your arthritis medicine. And he will be swollen. Yeah. And he's like, oh, my knuckles will be swollen. And I can't, whatever. Why? That would be my first thing is I'd be like, why are you worried that they're going to fit? Why are we worried? Why are we worried?
That there's nothing appropriate and there's no legal.
Oh, but anyways, so when he was asked to put the gloves on, he really he struggled, really struggled. Just, it was so terrible. So terrible. And also they had on camera him wearing the same isotoner gloves while he was doing commentary for sports.
benefit to this in terms of what is appropriate in a court of law. If the defendant would like to testify, that's fine. But to do this and then shield himself from cross-examination, say, don't ask me any questions. I just want to get up there and show you something. I want you to draw inferences from this. I want you to take evidence from this without being subject to cross-examination is entirely inappropriate.
I
He
agree.
would not be entitled to do that because there would have to be a foundation laid. People versus Perez makes that very clear.
He was an actor. And you know what? The other thing is he was very charismatic. He was super charismatic. And, and we talk about this a little bit in the videos that I posted. I think he knew how to play what room he was in, who he was with. He was a chameleon and he would change himself in that way. Also, seeing her do this in real time, Marcia Clark is an animal.
It indicated that it would be irrelevant as demonstrative evidence as well, which is what the defense claims it's proposing here. Although the people dispute that, and really it's a testimonial in nature kind of thing they're proposing. Nevertheless, even if it's demonstrative, the court in Perez ruled that because the defendant had laid no foundation for the admission of the evidence, it was appropriately denied. In this case as well, what the defendant proposes to do requires either his presence on the witness
Okay,
stand.
so we get this. He can't get up if he doesn't do cross-examination, which I agree with 1,000%. All right, what's coming next? Who's this?
The suggestion that a plea of not guilty
Is this Uleman? I forgot his name.
subjects a defendant to examination is simply not the law. The plea of not guilty is what sets this trial in motion and puts the burden on the people of proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. It's really incredible to suggest that somehow the jurors will be prejudiced by actually hearing the plea of not guilty from the mouth of the defendant himself.
No, that's...
Actually, the only person who can enter the plea is the defendant.
No, she's bringing up a great point. Wait, is this live? Mr. Pike. She's bringing up a great point. He cannot get up and talk to the jury if he's not going to be cross-examined. It's not fair. You can't decide when you will and when you won't make a statement in the court.
Defendant himself, and to have the jury
I think this
observe
is
the
Uleman.
defendant and hear his plea of not guilty from his own lips.
They're both live streams,
The
Pike.
suggestion that this is some sort of ploy to capitalize on the defendant's charisma, we do not want them to view him as a human being, and I think it would be the liberty that would
Okay. When do we get to the actual trial?
Thank you, counsel.
All right, here comes Carl E. Douglas. What does he have to say?
All right, I've reviewed
I'm going to try and speed through this as fast as I possibly
cases
can.
cited by the people, and the only cases that I could find that were of interest were a case out of New York and a case out of the Supreme Court of Mississippi that dealt specifically with the request of a represented client to address directly a jury. The motion to
Which,
allow
that's the other thing. When they talk about the gloves and they talk about him walking up to the jury box and trying on the glove, he was saying, he's like, oh, this is too small. This is too this. You're not allowed to say anything to the jury. He was not supposed to be saying anything. He was supposed to get up. He was supposed to try on the gloves and show it to the jury. And he went above and beyond. And then oh, it's too small. Oh, it doesn't fit. Oh, X, Y, and Z, which you literally cannot do. But we know that he got preferential treatment from start to finish.
the defendant to directly address the jury will be denied. The motion to allow him to exhibit to the jury his knee injuries or the result of the scarring and the surgeries will be allowed. All right, counsel, we need to resolve then the last remaining issues on the exhibits, and we'll be prepared to go forward with opening statements. Mr. Douglas.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning. Yesterday evening, Your Honor, we were attempting... One moment, Your Honor.
So this is one of his defense attorneys. His name is Carl E. Douglas. I have mixed feelings about him. I like him a lot when I watch him in his interviews, although there are some things that he has admitted to doing that are not ethical, and whatever. It's so funny because I talk in these next 3 episodes, I talk so much smack about defense attorneys, and I know that they have a job to do, but when you go out of the way to, like, I don't know, I guess what side it's on. Because like if you look at the defense attorneys in Karen Reed's case, I love them. I think they're fantastic, but I also feel like they're doing an ethical job. This dream team, They did their job. They had a job. It was to defend their client and do what they needed to do. That's what they were paid for. But some of the unethical things that they did, I'm just like, well, I don't know. If you have a case, like they staged the house to look a certain way when the jurors went back into the house. And it's just, I don't know. There's some stuff that I'm just like, ugh. I don't know. I feel like if I were to be one or the other, it would be a prosecutor, not a defense attorney. I don't know.
Your Honor, we were discussing the possibility of making alterations to the SOC timeline chart, of which there was an objection. As the court will see, we have altered the offending language to reflect the details and circumstances of a report that was part of an analyzed evidence report that I'd like to submit to the court and which I have already given to opposing counsel. What it says basically, Your Honor, is that there is a notation referring to different pieces of evidence. There is a notation for socks, navy blue / black. There is
the June 29th report.
This is a report, Your Honor, if I may approach.
No, just answer my question. Is it the June 29th report?
Yes, it is. And it talks about there being, quote, dress socks, semicolon, blood search, paren, none obvious, close paren. And we would submit, Your Honor, that this is in fact a fair reflection of what we think the evidence is going to show. We would submit that that chart is not unduly prejudicial, and we would submit that the court should overrule the objections and allow the admittance of that chart.
Who was the author of that report?
This refers, Your Honor, this document apparently was prepared for the split hearing.
I'm opening Discord right now.
And Yamauchi, Kessler, and Matheson each testified about the process by which they took out different pieces of evidence and examined it. And this was a document that was prepared specifically for that hearing.
All right, that doesn't answer my question.
Who prepared the report?
Who prepared that report?
Michelle Kessler, Greg Matheson, and Colin Yamauchi.
Was that the index that was prepared, the evidence index?
It says summary of analyzed evidence by analysis performed. That's the title.
Okay.
It's Exhibit 2 at the split hearing. The remaining objection, Your Honor, would be in response to the concerns about the videotapes and the scenes that were reflected of different officers walking through the crime scene at various times. We have now...
All right, I want to see testimonies. This is just and this is like preliminary stuff. I want opening statements. Here we go. Christopher Darden starts it off. No, it's okay. Thank you for telling me. I think this is OJ's mom right here in the blue. There's Denise Brown. That's Nicole Brown's sister.
We'll stand in recess until 10:30.
Recess? No. Give me the opening statements.
His counsel, Mr. Shapiro, Mr. Allman, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Douglas, Mr. Bailey, people represented by Ms. Clark.
All right, here we go.
Audience, please be seated.
They stand as the jury walks in.
We are going to begin with the opening statements made by the lawyers made to you. These opening statements case you.
All right, opening statements.
All right, you may proceed. Mr. Darden.
All right, Mr. Darden starts.
Your Honor, Judge Ito, Mr. Cochran, Mr. Shapiro, and Dean Ullman, and to my colleagues seated here today in front of you, and to the real parties in interest in this case, the Brown family, the Goldman family, and the Simpson family, and to you ladies and gentlemen of the jury, good morning. I think it's fair to say that I have the toughest job in town today. Except for the job that you have. Your job may just be a little bit tougher, but your job, and like my job, both have a central focus, a single objective, and that objective is justice, obviously. It's going to be a long trial, and I want you to know how much we appreciate your being on the panel. We appreciate the personal sacrifices you're making by being sequestered. We understand that can be difficult.
Like they have a choice.
And I'd like to thank you in advance for keeping the promises you made to us when you were selected for the jury initially. You promised to be fair. You promised to be open-minded. You promised to hear and see and carefully consider all the evidence in the case. And you promised to find this case, to come to a verdict in this case solely on the basis of the evidence and the law given to you by Judge Ito. And you promised to do that based on the law, based on the facts and the evidence, and nothing else. You promised us that you had no hidden agenda, that you only wanted to see justice done, and you promised us that you would do everything you could under the law to see that justice was done. And so I thank you for that, and I thank you in advance for the verdict you will at some point render in this case. And we're here today, obviously, to resolve an issue, to settle a question that's been on the minds of people throughout the country these last 7 months. It certainly has been on the mind of my people up in Richmond, California, and friends in Fayetteville, Georgia, and all across the country, and everybody wants to know, and everybody I know often posed the question to me, did OJ Simpson really kill Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman?
Yes.
Well, finally, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here in front of you this morning to answer that question. And we'll answer that question from the witness stand, and from the exhibits you'll see in this case, and from the evidence. And when you see the evidence, and when you hear the witnesses, and when you put it all together and consider the totality of circumstances in this case, the answer will be clear to you as well. The answer to the question is yes. The evidence will show that the answer to the question is yes. OJ Simpson murdered Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman. And I'm sure you'll be wondering why as the trial proceeds on, and I'm sure you're wondering why right now. As the judge instructed you already, opening statements are not evidence. Opening statements are given by lawyers, and in an opening statement, we inform the jury of what we think the evidence will show in this
Hi,
case.
Critical. I agree with you. I'm not loving it.
But we're lawyers. We're not witnesses. We're not under oath. Nothing we say is evidence. The things we say to you today.
Which is true, because as we get into Johnny Cochran's, he's like, OJ has never been, not convicted, but he's never been charged with domestic violence, which is a blatant lie. That was not true at all.
Are not the things that you should carry into the jury room and into deliberations. You should carry into the jury room and into your deliberations the evidence in the case, the testimony from the witness stand, the exhibits admitted at trial, the instructions given to you by the court. And when you look at all of that, when you go back and reflect on the testimony and the exhibits and everything you heard and saw in this case, you'll know why he killed Nicole Brown and Ronald Goldman. And when I give you the answer as I have, and you consider and you stop and consider and you think, why would he do it? Why would he do it? Not O.J. Simpson, not the O.J. Simpson we think we know, not the O.J. Simpson we've seen over the years. But that raises another question, and that question is, do you know O.J. Simpson? We've seen him play football for USC. We watched him thrash UCLA and play in the Rose Bowl. We watched him win the Heisman Trophy.
I agree with you, Maddow.
He may be the best running back in the history of the NFL. We watched him leap turnstiles and chairs and run to airplanes in the Hertz commercials.
Yeah, for
We
Jose
watched him with a
Menendez.
50-inch afro and Naked Gun 33.5, and we've seen him time and time again. And we came to think that we know him. What we've been seeing, ladies and gentlemen, is the public face, the public persona, the face of the athlete, the face of the actor. It is not the actor who is on trial here today, ladies and gentlemen. It is not that public face. It is his other face. Like many men in public, like many public men, they have a public image, a public persona, a public side, a public life, and they also have a private side, a private life, a private face. And that is the face we will expose to you in this trial. The other side of O.J. Simpson, the side you've never met before. We will expose in this trial and show to you in this trial that other face, the face he wore behind the locks and the gates and the walls at Rockingham, that other face, the one that Nicole Brown encountered almost every day of her adult life, the one she encountered in the last moments.
Now, here's what we're doing with this. I really want you guys, as we sit here and we go through this, I really want you guys to sit and we're all going to kind of reconvene, as the jury. We are the jury. That's what we're doing today. And I have to tell you, Critical, I agree with you. This is not my favorite opening statement. For me, if I was a juror, I don't need you to, I know what opening statements are, but also, like, You don't need to keep reiterating what you're going to show me. Just get into the facts. Like, I think that's one of the best things that you could do in an opening statement. Like, if I were a juror, just get into the facts.
Of her adult life. The same face Ronald Goldman encountered during the last moments of his life. When we look upon and look behind that public face, the public...
I understand, too. Critical Moss says, as much as it may peeve someone, opening and closing statements need narrative. And that's fine. You can give me narrative, but I don't need fluff. I don't need the extra. I need the facts. That tells a narrative. That tells a story. I would open it up with Nicole Brown Simpson has called the police 8 separate times. We have a video, we have a tape of her actively getting assaulted on the phone. You don't need to say anything else to the jury other than Nicole Brown Simpson's side of the story. Although I'm not a prosecutor, I'm not a lawyer. I just, if I, because I'm a pretend lawyer in my basement, I would you start a story, right? You start the story with intrigue. You start the story with something that's going to grab their attention. And what grabs their attention? A picture of Nicole Brown Simpson's face. That's what I would have started it with.
Man who sits here in court today, you'll see a different face. And the evidence will show that the face you'll see and the man that you will see will be the face of a batterer.
Honestly, I would focus, because OJ was so well liked, I feel like I would have focused less on OJ and more on Nicole is what I would have done. Forget OJ. Let's show them Nicole's face. Let's show them her diary. Let's show them her 911 calls. And because you have to go into this assuming everybody already likes OJ. You aren't a lawyer. You just play one on YouTube. I do. I'm a very good one. I haven't lost a case yet, John.
A wife beater, an abuser, a controller.
Blinging with Kimberly brings up a good point. There were jurors admitted that they were not going to convict him. If you watch the Made in America documentary, there is a juror that actively says this was payback for Rodney King. I don't think in this climate at this time, how much evidence, how much proof, how much anything they really could have had, I don't think he would have gotten a conviction. Oh, the diaries weren't? Because I know they talked about them at some point. They were taken from her safety deposit box. I do know that. But I just, I don't think at this time he would have gotten a conviction. I just think that racial tensions, especially in LA, were far too high. I still blame OJ for the crime of making the Kardashians a thing. Yeah.
You'll see the face of Ron's and Nicole's murderer. To understand what happened at Bundy, we need to examine this defendant's relationship with Nicole. Because when we do, we can discern from that, we can see a motive. We can see his motive for killing his ex-wife.
No, see, and this is the thing. Listen, Darden is a very accomplished lawyer, but it's like, we can see that he's an abuser. We can see, this is a man who, even after his wife did the right thing and filed for divorce, even after she left him, even after she got out, he still harassed her. He still tried to break into her house. He still went after her. He still harassed her. Like, I just want him to bring it up. I found it funny that the civil case jury saw the same evidence and found him liable. Yeah. So here's the thing, though. Criminal trials and civil trials are very different, right? And the proof of burden is also very different. So you also have to put yourself as a juror, right? I hate that word, juror. I can never say it right. But you have to put yourself in the shoes of a juror. And here's the thing. Let's talk about Scott Peterson for 1 second. Do I think that Scott Peterson committed that crime? Absolutely. Do I think that the prosecution had enough evidence to sentence that man to death? Now knowing what I know about the court system, now knowing what I know about jury instructions, no, I don't. I don't know if I could have been presented that same evidence and convicted Scott Peterson. Do I think he did it? Yeah. Do I also think that there's reasonable doubt? Sure. OJ was well liked and he was physically attractive. Saying the OJ that killed her is a different OJ, saying look at him, doesn't do anything. We have to take into account. Right. You have to assume that you're going in against the most well-liked man in America, period. OJ was huge at this time.
And gentlemen, that as the trial...
This wasn't too long after the Rodney King trial and verdict. I believe it was... When was that trial? Because I know it was years when Rodney King happened. I just don't remember when the trial was.
He's on, and as you hear the evidence in this case, that motive will become clear.
Yeah, what's the motive? What's the motive? Explain it to me here. He was jealous. He was abusive. I mean, narcissist wasn't a big word then, but he's an abuser. He actively assaulted his wife. 2 years. Thank you.
He killed Nicole for a single reason. Not because he hated her. He didn't hate Nicole. He didn't kill her because he didn't love her anymore, because in his mind, he did.
No, he killed her because he was controlling. He killed her because he couldn't lose. He killed her because he couldn't allow her to be with anybody else. Hi, Ludwig.
He killed her for a reason almost as old as mankind itself. He killed her out of jealousy.
Yes. Thank you.
He killed her because he couldn't have her.
Mm-hmm.
And if he couldn't have her, he didn't want anybody else to have her.
Very true. Thank you, John.
To control her. Control is a continuing theme. It was a continuing theme. The central focus of their entire relationship. By killing Nicole, this defendant assumed total control over her. By killing her, he committed the ultimate act of control. By killing her, no one else could have her. No one but him. And he killed Ron Goldman.
Yes, Kimberly says there were witnesses that were not called, and one of them was called, and then she sold her. We'll get into that into the videos that I put up, but one of them was called, but she sold her story to the press.
And he killed Ron Goldman for another reason. He killed Ron Goldman because he got in the way.
Yeah, I do believe that. I think Ron was just wrong place, wrong time.
He killed Nicole because he had a problem with her, as men and women sometimes do have in relationships. They have a problem. And this defendant's problem, the man in the courtroom, I think he stated his problem rather eloquently at his weight, as he stood over his body at his weight. And he said then, and he said on other occasions, and I quote, he said, while standing over that casket, while standing over Nicole's body, my problem was that I loved you too much. But it wasn't really love, ladies and gentlemen. And this will be reflected in the evidence, and the evidence will establish this, that it wasn't really love.
I have to tell you,
for Nicole Brown wasn't love, it was obsession. He became obsessed with her.
I like Christopher Darden.
And his obsession was so great.
This does not resonate with me.
He developed a need to control her. And his need to control and his feeling of obsession was so great that when he came to realize that he could not.
I know now some of the ins and outs of what you can do on a trial and how you can talk to people, and they go in and they dress you a certain way, you act a certain way. If this were me, right, and I were an attorney in this trial, and a man, right, I would sit down with somebody who is familiar with domestic abuse, and I would say, listen, I need you to talk to me about what points I need to bring up to hit this home. What am I going to talk about? Like, because if you don't understand the ins and outs, out of 12 people, there's somebody who has experienced abuse at some point on that jury, right? How do you connect with them? How do you talk to them in a way that they understand? And as somebody myself who's been at the hands of abuse, sitting here, none of this is sitting with me. None of this. Ron was wrong place, wrong time, and Nicole was wrong place for a long time. Yeah, but I mean, the cycle of abuse is so hard to get out of, and the fact that she was able to still pick up the pieces and get out is amazing in itself. Why does it always seem like the bigger cases always have important witnesses' testimony that aren't allowed in the trial or evidence? Yeah, I don't know. That's a great idea. I can see what you mean. It'll have some sort of play on the jury at least. Well, I just think if you're putting forth an opening statement or a trial, right, and your proof of burden hinges on domestic violence and domestic abuse, your goal is to become so knowledgeable in that field. You need to have people who've experienced it. You need to have people who are experts in it. There is nothing about this that's resonating with me at all.
Keep her. He killed her. Because to let her go would mean to lose control of her. To let her go with Ron Goldman or someone else would mean to lose control. He couldn't have her. And neither could anyone else. Now, the evidence in this case will establish that the man in the courtroom, this defendant, is an extremely controlling and possessive man. And as I said before, control and possessiveness was a single dominant theme throughout their relationship. And he controlled her in a variety of ways. He controlled her financially. When the defendant and Nicole first met, she was barely 18 years old. He was almost 30. She shared an apartment. He owned a mansion. She waited tables at a restaurant. He was a millionaire. No one had ever heard of Nicole Brown, but he was one of the most recognized men in America. But after he met her, he slowly began to control her.
But how does he do? See, that's the thing that I think that's the point that I'm trying to make, right? Yes, he tried to control her. Now we're talking about power dynamics. You can't just umbrella it. You have to get into it. He started taking away the money. He started, you have to lay that out for people. Nicole had over 60 instances of domestic violence in her diaries. That's awful. And OJ, the athlete, and the murderer were the same. It would have been better to provide that link in the narrative. He couldn't lose the competitor and the controller. Yeah, that's a great point. It's almost impossible to get away from an abuser. Even when you break free and go no contact, they continue to think of you and to feel a sense of ownership over you. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we've seen in this case, because there are a lot of people. That's the one thing about this juror who said that this was payback for Rodney King and the Made in America. One of the things that she said was so disgusting to me is, I don't have any respect for a woman who will take punches to the face and doesn't leave. And it's like, what? Like, the cycle of abuse, and I cannot stand why didn't they leave? Why don't you just shut up? The details of the types of things he'd do to control her and ruin her life and their lives, how he run her life. Yeah. And how he wanted. Right. Why wasn't he called? There was a guy that she was dating who OJ showed up when they were on dates together. Absolutely. Absolutely.
She shared an apartment with a friend. He got her own apartment. He bought her things. He gave her things. The time she was 19, she was driving a Porsche. He got it for her.
Yeah, I want you to say, and that's the thing. All of these gifts had strings attached. I bought this for you. I gave this to you. Who said that again? Who said what? I have two different chats going because I have a landscape and I have vertical chat. So if you're confused as to who I'm talking to, I got two different chats. Sorry, it's a little confusing.
he began to gain control over her. And throughout the years, throughout the relationship, he maintained that economic control over her, that financial control. The evidence will show that Nicole never really held a job. She never really worked. She never really operated a business. She never had an income really of her own. Throughout her entire adult life, this man, the defendant in the courtroom, held the purse strings in her life. Whatever money she got.
Oh, the comment about not leaving abusers. So there was a documentary called Made in America, and it was one of the jurors who said that. She said, I don't have any respect for a woman who will like take punches to the face and stay. And I was like, yuck. But if Nicole had killed him in self-defense, they would have found her guilty. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I disagree with that.
Whatever material possessions she got from the defendant.
Yeah, but they weren't gifts. Explain that they weren't gifts. These aren't gifts.
People can sometimes be bought.
No.
And young people sometimes can be easily misled.
Yeah, it was a woman, Madel.
Nicole was a very young woman, if a woman at all, when she first met this defendant, the man seated in the courtroom. And as the years went on, and as they continued to date, and as he gained more and more control over her, the more control he gained, the more abusive he became. As you listen to the evidence in this case, you're going to be hearing evidence regarding domestic abuse, domestic violence, stalking, intimidation.
Yes. That's what I want you. That's the meat and potatoes I want you to get into.
Wife beating, public humiliation. As you listen to the trial and as you hear this evidence and see this evidence, please keep in mind that all of these different kinds of abuse were all different methods to control her. Let me proceed on. The evidence will show in this case that he abused her mentally. He stripped her of her self-esteem.
Yes.
This defendant dictated the way Nicole would dress.
See, I don't like that he does that either. I don't like that he goes into this defendant. I wish he would have focused more on Nicole. Nicole could not dress a certain way without getting approval from OJ. Nicole could not wear her hair a certain way. I feel like when he says the defendant does this, like it really takes the person that Nicole is out of it. Like you don't have a personal attachment to her.
She would wear her hair. And when he didn't like her appearance, he would criticize her, he would humiliate her to the point that she would cry. If he didn't like her shoes, he'd go out and buy shoes.
That's her mother.
I want you to wear.
Right here. And that's her sister.
Look like this. She was not a Barbie doll, ladies and gentlemen. The evidence would show that he was so controlling that he attempted to define her identity. He attempted to define who she was.
Hi, Eljigad. Eljigad. Oh, there's Denise.
And put on weight.
This is her other sister.
The evidence would show that this defendant was so abusive that he called her names. He called her fat. He called her a pig. And he did this in the presence of her family and in the presence of her friends.
Yeah.
And he humiliated her.
He sure did, Kim.
We intend to expose in this trial. That's the other side of this defendant. We're going to show you in this trial. And by doing these things and by hurling these insults, he stripped her of her self-esteem. And when you're controlling someone financially, and when they have no self-esteem, and when they have no identity, you have them.
Oh my God, F. Lee Bailey's like falling asleep.
The evidence will show that this defendant, this man in the courtroom, was a very controlling and possessive man.
Look at him just smiling.
Throughout their relationship was his control of Nicole Brown.
Yes, Carl, I agree.
But he did more. He did more than just demean her.
He's just
in the presence of others.
He's so smug.
He attempted to isolate her, sometimes from some people. When certain men came around, he became jealous. And he became so jealous that it got to the point that she would not agree or want to be a
Pina brings up a great point. Some people don't understand the cycle of abuse. It's not linear. Your abuser goes through phases of adoration and doting on you to devaluing you, and it's very confusing for the victim. And the other thing is is when you're in these abusive relationships, the only way that you can have those high highs is because you've had those low lows. And that's the thing, is you get this and you're like, oh, we're in love and we're doing great and this is great. And then the other shoe drops. And it never comes, there's never like a gradual, once you're in it, there's never like a gradual lead up. It's like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then wham, like it just out of nowhere, they just turn. You don't even see it coming anymore because you don't know when it's going to be.
Around certain men, because she was concerned that he might get you, by their mere presence. And as time went on, and as he became jealous, and more jealous, he even insisted that she not be around certain men. He began to isolate her, ladies and gentlemen. When her friends came around, her girlfriends came around, and when he felt that she was spending too much time with those girlfriends, he talked to the girlfriends. He let them know he didn't like them hanging around. He dissuaded her girlfriends from.
Oh, Kimberly, there was so much that wasn't collected. With the circle of abuse, there are also the gaslighting and convincing the victim that they caused, yes, the abuser to be abusive, because the victim becomes convinced that they hurt the perpetrator. Exactly. You made me so upset. You did this. If you could just, I remember I had a boyfriend who said that to me all the time. If you could just what? And it was just get along with what they needed.
Hanging around. He attempted to isolate her from other people. And when you isolate someone, and when you have economic control over someone, and when you strip someone of their self-esteem, and when you establish their identity, you have them. They're yours, you can control them, and the evidence would show in this case that this man is an extremely possessive and controlling individual, and that he is an extremely obsessive individual when it came to Nicole, and his obsession was manifested by the things he did toward controlling her, but demeaning her and controlling the purse strings and isolating her and defining who she would see and who she wouldn't see and who her friends would be and who they would not be wasn't all this defendant did to control this woman.
God bless you. Who was that?
Of control. There's force.
Yeah, Carl, I like
violence.
Darden. I don't love this opening statement.
There's fear. There's intimidation.
Yes, Mandel, it's ownership.
And you will hear testimony. You will see evidence that in his quest to control Nicole,
I agree, El Jacad, but there are so many things that didn't go collected. If you watch this new documentary, it's upsetting. Very upsetting.
this defendant used all these things. He used fear. He used intimidation. And he used violence. And he instilled such a fear in her, ladies and gentlemen. She heard testimony that he could walk into a room. He could walk into a room, and Nicole would be there, and a moment before he walked in, she would just be the most charming individual there is, relaxed. But when he walked in, her demeanor changed completely. As time went on, his mere presence became intimidating to her. I mentioned earlier that they met when she was around 18 years old back in 1977, and they dated for 8 years. And they eventually married in 1985. And the marriage was a stormy marriage. And it was a marriage punctuated by acts of violence.
Exactly, John.
And that violence would always be followed by an apology. He would apologize, give her jewelry, fire flowers.
I also wish he kept this timeline linear, like just ...
He promised to do better.
It was abusive from start to
Promised
finish.
maintain control of himself.
Now tell me how. Tell me why.
And he promised not to do it again. And then those acts of violence would be followed by additional acts of violence, and it became a cycle. Violence, apologies, a period of quiet and calm, then violence and apologies, quiet and calm. Violence, apologies. Quiet, calm. A cycle of violence characterized their relationship. It characterized their marriage. And domestic violence, ladies and gentlemen, that's a difficult topic, because domestic violence is something that happens behind the gates and the walls. It happens in the bedroom and inside the home and in places where the public can't see. Domestic violence is a private affair, generally, while it's occurring. And so it makes it difficult to obtain evidence, to gain proof that the violence occurred. And it makes it difficult to obtain evidence.
Don't say that. Because you have evidence and you have proof that it occurred. You had the pictures, you have the 911 calls, you have the police testimonies. I wish he didn't say that. I know he did it because I was going through a divorce. I was very angry at the money grubbing. I went BK instead, paid nothing, and raised my daughter as a single dad. Friends today, new spouses too. Look at you. We love a good dad. I remember watching the court case live. Everything about it seemed like a bunch of people, lawyers and judge included, trying to get famous on the back of a double murder. If you go into this documentary, Christopher Darden talks about how letting what it does to let cameras into the courtroom, and like it made everybody act up because they knew how high profile this was.
That the relationship is a violent relationship, but we do have that proof. We do have proof. We do have evidence. You will hear testimony from witnesses in this case, and they will discuss the violent relationship, the violent marriage this defendant had with Nicole Brown. In 1985, the police responded to the defendant's home in Rockingham in response to a call. And when they arrived, they were met by Nicole.
Go into 1989 when he was actually charged with domestic violence. He pleaded no contest.
She was near hysterics. She told these people, she said, we had a fight. After the fight, I was trying to leave, and when I tried to leave, the defendant grabbed a baseball bat, and he took that baseball bat and smashed the windshield to my car.
And he was standing there with the bat.
This is 1985.
You know, somebody made a great point in my comments, and that was how different this case would be because the police now have to wear like body cams.
And as they looked around, these law enforcement officers looked to the right, and they saw a white 450 SL Mercedes-Benz. And the windshield was smashed out. And just then the defendant came out of the house. And he offered an explanation. Well, the police didn't arrest him. They left. They left Nicole there. They left the defendant there. And that isn't an act of physical violence toward Nicole, is it? Or is it? Maybe it is.
It is. It's intimidation. I'm so confused by this opening statement.
And if you're married to someone and you love someone and you have a fight with them and they take a baseball bat and they do something like that to one of your prized possessions, could it be?
That's a good question. I don't know.
They're sending a message. The evidence will show that this was a message. It was an indication. It was a warning as to what would happen next. It was a warning that what happened to this Mercedes-Benz could just as well happen to you.
If somebody, and I think too, I'm looking at this through the 2025 lens, right? Like we know so much more about what is considered abuse. And if a person assaults an inanimate thing, okay, around you because they're mad at you and they can't control themselves and they take a bat to a windshield or they start punching holes in your drywall, that's abusive behavior. Absolutely. I once knew a woman, newlyweds, who would be funny, talking normally, but when the spouse walked into the room, her demeanor changed. She was quieter. When she left him, she told us why. Yeah. even when you try to make it not obvious, it's obvious a lot of times to people who pay close enough attention. And that's the hardest thing, because then it becomes, how do you say something without also losing that friend? Those things become difficult.
And it did happen to Nicole. Not with the baseball bat, but just like that Mercedes got smashed and dented, so did Nicole. You'll be hearing evidence. You'll be hearing testimony. You'll be seeing witnesses in this case regarding an incident that happened on January 1, 1989.
There it is.
It was almost 4 o'clock in the morning on January 1st when the 911 operator received a telephone call from Rockingham. And that operator will be here to testify in court. And that operator will be here to authenticate the tape of that 911 call.
Hindsight's always 20/20, Carl.
And when the operator appears and when the tape is played, listen very carefully. Because if you listen carefully, in the background, you will hear a woman screaming. And you'll hear something else. You will hear the sound of this defendant, this man, beating this woman. You
This
will hear
monster.
the sound of his hand smacking across her face. You will hear the sound of this defendant beating his wife.
LJ, God, I depend on you to know things. Don't.
The police arrived. They arrived at Rockingham in response to that telephone call. Nicole never got to tell the 911 operator to come and help me or anything like that. All she did was scream, and the operator could hear her screaming, and the operator could hear her being beaten. And she advised LAPD units
Right, she dispatched the cars.
to respond to 360 North Rockingham. We can hear the sound of a woman being beaten now, right now. And the officers arrived at Rockingham a short time later. And when they did, they rang the buzzer to the security gate. And as they did so, they saw someone run from the bushes, run from the darkness in their direction. And this person that they saw was Nicole. And Nicole came running out of the darkness, wearing nothing but sweatpants and a bra, running toward the officers.
She said he's going to kill me.
She was dirty, she was filthy, and she ran toward the officers. And as she ran toward the officers, she was shouting and yelling, "He's going to kill me!
Yeah.
He's going to kill me!" And the officers stood there. They didn't know what to do. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. She's out in her bra. Sweatpants are covered with mud. They just got a call. There's a woman in Rockingham being beaten now. She comes running out of the darkness and out of the mud and out of the bushes. And she pushes a button to the security gate, and she runs through the gate, and she collapses in the arms of the officer.
We talked about this too, and Mark Furman recalls back on when he had an interaction with Nicole, and he said, if you want to press charges, that's the only way that I could do things. And I believe that the law has changed now, that I think if you, like if a police officer were to come to your house and you were to have visible marks on you, I think at this point in time in 2025, the police can make that call. They can step in and press charges for you. I will have to look into that. I'm not 1,000% sure, but let me see.
To kill me. It's going to kill me. And the officer said, who's going to kill you? And she said, OJ is going to kill me. And the officers looked. They looked at her. Her eye was full. Bruised. Her lip was cut. And one of the officers, the senior officer there, he looked at her neck. And what he saw startled him.
Okay, so a police can arrest without victim's consent. Yes. Some states have mandatory arrest policies. Prosecutor decides, and the court may issue a protective order or a restraining order. So they can now do that without you having to do that.
On her neck, you could see the imprint of a hand.
Yeah, thank you, Carl.
The imprint of a hand around her neck. Well, it was then that the defendant
Lucia.
came out of the house. He was wearing nothing but his bathrobe. And he did not address his wife at the time. And he did not ask the police how she was doing or if she was okay. What the evidence will show, and what you will hear in this case, is that he demeaned and humiliated her even more. He shouted to the officers in the presence of Nicole, his wife, "I've got 2 women now.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
I don't need that one. I don't want that one in my bed anymore." This was his wife, and this is what he said to these officers.
Yeah, I forgot about that. He told the police, he was like, get her out of here. I got 2 women inside. I don't need this one anymore. That's the mother of your children. Like, what an asshole.
This is what he shouted out to the police.
I'll have to watch that. I haven't seen that one.
The officers were on one side of the gate of the wall, and the defendant at that time was on the other side. And the officer said, "Mr. Simpson, we're going to have to place you under arrest. It appears that your wife has been beaten. So please go back into the house and put on some clothes and come with us. We're going to take you to the station." Well, the evidence would show that that did not sit well with this defendant. And he responded, "The police have been here 8 times before. And now you're going to arrest me for this?" 8 times. That's what the defendant said. The police had been there 8 times before. And as he said, "You're going to arrest me for this?" The defendant told the officers, "This is a family matter." That's what the evidence would show. The defendant said to the officers, "This is a family matter." And he asked, "Why do you want to make such a big deal out of it? We can handle it." The evidence would show that the officers did not like the way he had handled things up to that point. And they insisted that he get dressed. They told him that he was under arrest and that they were going to take him to the station.
They finally stepped in.
Well, this was OJ Simpson.
I have this on 1.25 speed, and it's still, I feel like it's taking forever.
They chased after him, they didn't catch him, and he got away. The next day, he went to the Rose Bowl. But despite this, despite 89, what happened on January 1, 89, despite the Mercedes-Benz incident in 1985, she stayed. She stayed with him. And I'm not suggesting, and the evidence won't suggest, that every day of their marriage or their relationship was stormy.
No, this would be a great time to say she stays and start talking about the cycle of abuse. You feel trapped. You feel isolated. You feel like there's nowhere else for you to go. You don't feel like anybody's going to love you. You don't feel like you're going to have any money. You just feel like this is the only place. I have it both on vertical and landscape. I was thinking about getting rid of the vertical, though, and just going back to landscape because, I don't know, this is bothering me. I thought I'd try it out.
Violence. That's not what we're suggesting here. But we are suggesting, and the evidence will show, that there was a cycle of violence. A cycle of violence, and the dominant theme in that relationship and in that cycle, and the ultimate objective was always
Actually,
control.
Eljek, I'd go to vertical.
Control.
All right.
Well, after the 89 incident, after that night, their relationship changed somewhat. She was concerned. And the defendant was concerned. The defendant is a public man, and he was concerned about his public image. And in the public domain and in the public media, back in 1989, he was interviewed by Roy Firestone on ESPN. And during that interview, Mr. Firestone asked the defendant about that incident on the morning of
Oh, he
January
like
1.
makes a joke of it on this.
And the defendant downplayed it.
Yep.
He minimized things,
He sure did.
fluffed it over. And you'll hear, see that interview. And in that interview, the defendant said, It was sort of a mutual wrestling match. She was wrong, he was wrong. Ta-da. No big deal. And that's what he said to the press, and to the public. He minimized things. But you'll hear testimony from investigators employed with the DA's office, and they'll tell you about a day just a few months ago when they drilled a hole in the safe deposit box, Nicole's safe deposit box. And they'll tell you about the day that they recovered photographs taken of Nicole's injuries back in 1989. And they'll also tell you about the recovery of some letters
He needs to wrap
the
this
defendant
up.
wrote to Nicole after the 1989 beating. And you'll see those
He's
letters.
lost me quite a few times.
They'll be here. You'll be able to read them. And you'll note that the account the defendant gave the press and the media and the public was not the same account he gave Nicole in those letters during that apology phase, the contrition phase, the phase he was going through. In the letter he wrote to Nicole, he apologized for hurting her. In the letter he wrote to Nicole, he admitted that he had lost control. And in the letter to Nicole, he said the same old thing he'd been saying all along, and that is that I will do better. We can get through this.
It is very long-winded.
And that happens in bad relationships.
You got to be snappy.
Doesn't it?
I need it snappy.
Things get bad things happen. It's always somebody's fault.
You know what? I think, critical, that is a great point. I think that is what, I can't highlight my chat. Why? Why do you hate me so? I think that's what bothers me the most. It feels nonchalant. This is a case of a domestic violence gone fatal, and it feels like just a flippant story. And that might be his thing. I've never seen him try any other case. I don't like it.
But nobody wants to take the blame. And in this situation, and the evidence will show that what the defendant did was he made these promises. He sort of roped her back in. You know how it is. Bad relationship, I'll do better, here's a gift, I'm sorry. And they just rope you back into it. And if you're the other person in Nicole's position, as she was, and this will be reflected in the evidence, she wanted to believe. She wanted to believe that her marriage could survive. She wanted to have hope, and he gave her hope.
No, that's not the way I would have taken it either. I would have been like, she felt trapped. She had nowhere to go.
Because this is a cycle. And so he beat her up on January 1, and he admitted to
He
her
goes
privately
back
in
and
a letter
forth,
that he
too.
was responsible, and he apologized, and he gave her things, and he tried to make it all better, and he gave her hope, and he roped her back in, and she stayed.
Made in America was fantastic, Mike.
She stayed because she had hope and because she wanted to believe that January 1, 1989 would be the last time that he would abuse her, physically or mentally. As you hear the evidence in this case, something very sad becomes very apparent.
That's the other thing I would have focused on, is the fact that not only does he have a long-standing history of domestic violence when he's in the when they're in the marriage, but I also would have talked about the level of violence and aggression after she left. He needs to paint the picture of she tried to escape and she couldn't do it.
They met when she was 18, and he was almost 30.
We've heard that again. Stop repeating
In
yourself.
1992, they divorced. She was only 33 or so. And she died when she was almost 35.
It's perm solution, El Jagad.
Throughout her adult life, throughout most of her adult life, her concept of marriage and a relationship was defined by this defendant. That was adult love. Her notion of adult love for 15 years was what this defendant gave her. And he abused her throughout that relationship.
Oh God, look at Ito.
Well, as I said before, sometimes you get roped in. People get roped in. Nicole got roped in by the defendant, and she stayed, and she stayed. And people stay in those situations, those abusive relationships, for years and years, until one or two things happen. One, they just can't take it anymore. Or two, until they just can't take it anymore and they wake up to reality. And finally, in 1992, Nicole woke up to the reality of her situation. And in January 1992, she moved from Rockingham, and she left the defendant.
All right,
and
I
she
gotta
filed for
speed you up,
divorce.
Darden. I'm sorry.
Well, this did not sit well with this defendant, and this will be reflected in the evidence. He did not like this. He did not like the fact that Nicole was leaving his house, going somewhere else to live in her own house, away from him. There's that issue of control.
Sorry, Pike.
How could he control her? She wasn't right there with him. And he didn't take it well, and he lost 20 to 25 pounds like that.
I don't think it's because.
And almost on a
So,
daily
Mike, why do good girls like bad boys? It doesn't always start out that way. And I think that's one thing that we've learned too over time is love bombing, right? It doesn't always it doesn't always start that way. It starts amazing and you're in love and there's flowers and romance and it's beautiful. And then we start picking. It's like just a little, start picking about maybe an action or, something that you did that they didn't like. And they start to see how much they can get away with. Then they start picking at your appearance and the clothes that you wear. And it starts because this thing starts happening. They start getting themselves above you, right? They start taking down your self-esteem. And when they start taking down your self-esteem, it's like, all right, now I can kind of tell you what to do and where to go. A lot of these guys don't start out like dicks, because if they just started out that way, a lot of these relationships wouldn't happen. They start out, they're great. And so I have to tell you, like, if your eyes are open to it, sometimes you can spot the red flags. But sometimes these guys are so good at what they do that you can't until it's too late. And it's difficult to, and then you get in it and you're like, some people are like, well, I invested so much time, or, it's like, oh, he was good to me once, he could be good to me again. It's a very complicated place to be. Very complicated.
He would call her sisters, Dominique and Tanya and Denise, and he'd call her mother and her father, sometimes crying on the telephone. He would call them and he would whine to them and he'd tell them how much he loved her and how he wanted her back. He'd use them.
Yep, I had that. I had a boyfriend that I broke up with him, and I was just like, listen, man, we are not going to, when I broke up with him, I was just like, I love you. I think you're great. You are not the man that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. And, I got to go. And I don't want to, I don't want to move on with this relationship. And he was pissed. And he went and emailed all of my friends. My best friend called me and she's like, I have to tell you something. She's like, I got an email from so-and-so. And I'm like, well, what does it say? And it was a fucking 8-page dissertation. He emailed the girls that I worked with. He emailed, I think he emailed my mom. And it was just all of this stuff about how they need to have a talk with me because I broke up with him and it's not his fault. I wasn't thinking clearly. And thank God I have the friends that I do who are like, what the fuck? My one girlfriend responded and was like, if you think that I'm going to take this message and go talk to my friend about this, you're out of your goddamn mind. The abuser was abused themselves and that becomes a rationale. I was hurt. When I was little and I lost my temper, or I don't trust you if you push back, you've hurt someone who was abused, Yeah. Or the you're pretty, but you're not that smart. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that. Or I don't like what you're wearing. I had a boyfriend, same boyfriend. We would be, and I'm an outgoing person, and I used to get drunk, and we would go dancing, and it'd be me and all my girlfriends, and I wouldn't even be flirting with anybody. We just would be out, and I'm dancing with my girlfriends, and we're having a good time, and he would come and he would give me the parent grab of the arm, and he would pull me off, and he would be like, you need to fucking chill. No. The other thing you never do is you never fucking tell me that I can't do something, because then I make it worse. So there was that. But I would have him like, and the funny thing is, so when I met my husband, let me tell you guys a little story about my husband. When I met, well, I knew my husband for a long time. We played softball together. I knew my husband for a long time before we got together. And when we sat down, I just told him, I was like, I'll never need you. I have my own apartment. I have my own car. I am my own person. I like to do my own shit. I will never need you. And he was like, that's great. Because I just got out of a relationship with a girl who needed everything from me. And I just looked at him and I go, okay, whatever. I didn't believe him, because every guy before that was like, I love that you're an independent woman. I love that you do these things. I love this, that, and all of the above. And then I come out and I'm the strong human being and I'm independent. And they're like, whoa, what the fuck? What do you mean? And I'm like, I fucking told you. And then they're like, whoa, what do you mean you have your own thoughts and opinions? And my husband, we would go out. And we would play softball together, and then we'd go to the bar afterwards, and I would get shit-faced. I would dance on girls. I would dance on guys. We would just be having a good time. I'd get piggyback rides around the bar from my friends who were dudes. Never a word. Never, because he never cared. My husband was just like, yeah, that's my girlfriend. She's great. Love her. Like, he thought it was fun. He thought it was funny. It was the first time that there was a guy who was attracted to me for who I was and didn't want to extinguish that flame at all. Ever. Softball player too. Yeah, we're pretty great. And that was the greatest thing. And even now, we've been married for 10 years this year, and my husband still celebrates my independence. We were actually at our white elephant party for Christmas with our neighbors, and I had brought a small, tiny karaoke machine and just getting stupid, just karaoke. And so like just singing with my friends and being dumb. And there's a picture of him in the background, and he's just looking at me and he's like, you know, if I could show you my husband, I would, but he's just looking at me. And I had showed him that picture. I go, thanks for not thinking that I'm, ridiculous. And he goes, I think it's funny. He goes, I think it's super fun when you get out and have a good time and whatever. And it's just so nice, because I used to have the complete opposite of that.
Ryan, roll protection. Well, she couldn't let him go. Not completely.
All right.
I mean, how could she?
Give me 1 second. This tea is kicking in. I got to go to the bathroom. I said I would leave you with music and I lied. Sorry. I can't listen to any more of this. If I was in the jury, I'd be like, I'm zoned out.
And so she didn't go too far. She rented a house in Brentwood.
All right.
We're here to tell you that was, the evidence will show also that this is all part of this cycle. It is all part of this dominant theme in their relationship. This is all part of his need.
All right, part 1.
To know everything about her.
Here we go. Let's go to this one.
He sat in it, and he sat there facing the coal, and he just stared at it.
Oh my God, it just goes on.
Staring at it.
Good God.
And you'll hear testimony
Christopher.
about this.
One
There we go. Let's get into Marsha's.
Who committed that final ultimate
I don't know
act
if
of
any of
control.
you, oh, hello. Hi. Whoa. I don't know if any of you ever listened to Dana Carvey's stand-up when he was doing his stand-up shows. But that's one thing I remember about his is when he talks about Marsha Clark and he's talking about this trial and he's like, how come my bangs? How come my bangs? That's all I think about now when I hear this. Is so funny when I talk about Marsha Clark. Hello. Let me give you guys a minute. Jesus Christ. What is happening? Okay. The tongue poking. Hold on. All right. Give me a second. Why can't I just be like a regular? Why can't the internet just leave me alone? Okay. Here I am. Hi. Thank you guys for being so patient because but on the other hand, the opening sequence of the trial seems no different. I don't know why I can't have nice things. I'm so sorry. You guys are the best. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, at least my Twidget wants to work. So there's that. You guys are the best. All right.
To him. And if he couldn't have her,
Nobody could. We get it.
nobody could.
Nobody could. If it worked right, I think I'd be in the wrong place. Why can't I just have nice things?
Ms. Clark?
I do have a good husband. I have a great husband. Hey, T-Bear. We got a bear in the chat. All right. Come on, Marsha. Marsha. I don't have a lot of time.
for a while, but
Hi.
I hadn't seen Mr. Darden. He was busy with other matters, and he is an integral member of our team. Let me introduce some of the other lawyers you haven't
No,
met
I don't
yet.
care. Get to the point.
That relates to the blood analysis and DNA. When you hear the amount of evidence that we have, you'll understand why I need the help. And I thank them very much for their able assistance thus far. Of course, you know Mr. Hodgman. He's still here. You've now heard the why. You've heard why. Why would Orenthal James Simpson, a man who seemingly had it all, commit such heinous crimes?
Because he's a monster.
The one simple truth about the evidence described to you by Mr. Darden is that it shows that Mr. Simpson is a man, not a stereotype, but flesh and blood, who can do both good and evil. Being wealthy, being famous cannot change one simple truth.
Critical, that's a
He's
great
person,
point.
And people have good sides and bad sides. Whether you see both sides or not, both sides are always there.
It seems very gentle.
Now, we will show you the other side of the smiling face you saw in the Hertz commercial, the one you never saw on camera, the one none of us ever wanted to see. And that was the side that went from Rockingham at his estate to Nicole's home at 875 South Bundy on the night of June the 12th, 1994. Now, on that night,
You know, I have to say, so T-Bear says OJ is guilty 100%. And now that he's gone, the question is, has justice been served? Honestly, even though it wasn't served in a court of law, I do think that at some point justice was served because OJ was so, his appearance was everything to him. And when he got out of this trial, he was embraced by the Black community because they needed this like beacon of hope at the time. But he was ostracized from the white community, which is the community that he tried to align himself with so much. And, you know, he couldn't be at Rockingham anymore. He couldn't go to the like golf clubs. He couldn't do the things that he wanted to anymore. And instead of having fame, he was infamous now. And I think that justice was served in that way because I think that the verdict of, you know, him being guilty publicly, I think that aided him. So in a weird way, I think it was. Oh, he never paid any money to the victims' families. Kim Goldman will say in this new documentary, she never saw a dime. They never saw a dime.
Many events were happening at the same time. And in order to give you a true picture, the most clear and accurate picture.
I have so many, I love that you brought this up. I have so many questions about Al Collins. I want to know where he was that night. I want to know how much he knows, because he made a comment to his ghostwriter that if he did it, he couldn't have done it by himself. And a lot of people think that it was actually OJ's son. But he said that to his ghostwriter, or to the writer of his book, that he, whoever was there was like trying to stop him. And I'm like, is it Al? Was Al there? Allegedly all for entertainment purposes only. I'm just wondering.
Of what really happened, how the events occurred. I'm going to go back and forth between the parties and between the locations. So what I want to do, first of all, is describe the setting for you. As of June the 12th, 1994, Nicole was living at 875 South Bundy in Brentwood. That's a condominium. It was a duplex, and so it's one building. She had one side, had a common wall, and her neighbors had another side. She lived there with her two children, Justin and Sydney. The defendant was living at 360 Rockingham.
Al's Bronco, this is a great point. A lot of people don't know this. Al had a similar white Bronco to OJ's. Al's Bronco was the one that they were driving in the Bronco chase because OJ's was impounded with the police. That was Al's car, and Al was driving it.
Avenue in Brentwood. Brian Kalin, known as Cato, some of you already are familiar with the name, was living in one of the guest units behind the defendant's home on Rockingham Avenue. The defendant's daughter, Arnell, lived next to Cato in another one of the guest units. I'll show you a diagram a little bit later to get you more familiar with the location, but the guest units are behind and apart from the main house, and they share common walls. It's kind of like one long building. So Cato had one, and then Arnell had the next.
It's probably a very nice duplex.
Now, the background on Cato, and the evidence will show you, is the following. Cato met Nicole in 1992 after she had left the defendant at a party in Aspen. They remained friendly after that point, not romantically, platonic, just friends. And he went to a party that she gave in Gretna Green in 1993. He noticed that that house had a guest unit behind it that was a separate living quarters, and he asked Nicole if he could rent that location. She said yes. She rented it to him for $450 to $500 a month, and he was allowed to reduce that
Could you
amount
imagine rent for $450 a month, friends?
The children. So that was an arrangement that worked out
Dang.
for everyone. However, Nicole decided to move out of Gretna Green in 1994, and she found the residence on Bundy that I've described to you. Now, the Bundy residence did have separate quarters with its own entrance and exit, but it was all under one roof. It didn't have a separate living quarter like the other house did on Gretna Green. The defendant asked Cato not to stay there, not to live under the same roof as Nicole, saying it wouldn't be appropriate. and he asked Cato to come stay in one of the guest units at his
It wouldn't be
house.
appropriate. It's none of your business if we're not together anymore. What's appropriate and what's inappropriate. If I get divorced from my husband, I could live with 5 men.
On Rockingham. He told Cato he could stay there for free. Cato, obviously, saw a much better financial situation for himself and agreed. And so in January of 1994, Cato moved to the guest unit behind the defendant's house on Rockingham, and Nicole moved to 875 South Bundy. Let me show you a board now of the Rockingham location.
We got you, Critical. One day I'll have a Patreon. We'll just all watch it together. All right. This is a south wall. I believe.
This is an overall diagram of the defendant's home on Rockingham Avenue in
Good
Brentwood.
God.
This location here, this area here, is the main house. These rooms that are shown down here are the guest units.
Oh, yeah. This is where they found
Now,
the glove.
Guest units close off.
Beep, 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 beep.
They're locked off with a door, so the
All
area
right.
here is
Come on. This is boring.
that Cato had access to.
Get into the...
I'll get into more detail about it later.
We're going to skip this, too. I'll get into more detail later. Just do it.
Now, before I really get into the events of the night,
All right. Why
June
is this
12th,
the most replayed? We'll just go
determined
here.
the identity of the people that once those skeletons were. And they did
Okay,
that
Mr. Pike.
recently to identify the Russian royal family that lived back in 1917. So you can see that the DNA testing procedures is a very powerful tool that is useful in many, many ways, not just in crime scene analysis, but in medical.
Now, you guys also have to remember this is one of the first times. I actually touch on it in, I think, my third episode. This is one of the first times that DNA was really at the forefront of a case. And I don't really think that the jury or us as public understood how to grasp the whole thing. Also, we got a 10-minute warning before I got to go. The font and the colors of the poster look like a child's picture book. Yeah, it just, all of this seems very different. When the verdict was read, they did look pretty stunned.
Medical diagnosis and in identifications that are necessary in other areas.
All right, let's get to Johnny.
Mr. Simpson is again present before, so it was a relatively minor turn that I'm sure Mr. Cochran.
That there's
Here we go.
to the Simpson family, to the Goldman families. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you. As the court indicated yesterday, I would have liked to have had this opportunity about 3:30 to address you. And it's my opportunity and it's my honor and privilege on behalf of the defense and our defense team, as it were, to stand before you now and address you what is called opening statement.
Oh, God.
Now, the opening statement is not opening argument, but it's just that, opening statement. If you've had occasion to go to a movie, you know that there's something called the previews of coming attractions. And that's what this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a guide, or a roadmap, if you will, of what we expect the evidence to show. As an officer of this court, and in the course of my remarks this morning, maybe this afternoon, I would expect to tell you as honestly and as forthrightly as I can what I expect the evidence to be. As the court has so appropriately indicated, what I say is not evidence. It's just to aid you and guide you. I hope you remember something else the judge said to you last night.
So aid me and
You heard
guide
the
me. Let's
prosecutor's opening statement
go.
yesterday. You were the same admonition applied to them. Those were not facts. But you kept an open mind because you promised to do that throughout. We started this process of trial back on September 26th, 1994. That was the first day we all met, when you came down to that jury room up on the 11th floor. And here we are now, several months later, in this search for justice. You hear a lot about this talk about justice. I guess Dr. Martin Luther King said it best when he said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And so we are...
Yeah, Lucia, and I understand what you're saying, right? Like, I think it seems boring because back in those days, we weren't so absorbed in the TikTok clips of trials. And now it's like they purposefully do stuff to catch the attention. That's not what my issue is. My issue is like, I don't need these guys to explain what an opening statement is. I don't need these guys to be like, I guess what irritates me is I don't need you to tell me what you're going to do. I just need you to do it. Just do it. What is the opening statement? It was uncommon to have opening statements that lasted more than a day. This is crazy.
Embarked upon this search for justice, this search for truth, this search for the facts. Each of you made a number of promises in the course of the voir dire examination, which is basically unprecedented and due mainly to the largesse of Judge Ito in understanding the possibility of media taint associated with this case. So we know a lot about you at this point. And we, of course, all sides are very, very pleased with the fact that you've agreed to serve as jurors, to give us your time, to leave your lives, to be sequestered, as it were. That's a remarkable sacrifice.
Yeah, these guys have been
Abraham Lincoln said it best when he
sequestered.
said that the highest act of citizenship is jury service. And you're embarked upon that jury service. But it doesn't stop with just coming down and taking. It stops is when you, if you can, render a verdict in this case. A verdict rendered in this case. You made these promises, and both sides are mindful of those promises. Violates his oath, profanes the divinity of faith itself. And of course, we know that you will live up to your promises. And be fair, and keep an open mind, and decide this case not on speculation, not on conjecture, not on surmise, but based upon the facts. You then, as jurors,
That's a
are
good
the
point,
conscience
Lucia.
of this community.
That's a good
Your
point.
verdicts set the standards.
We now know
we
what
should have and what should not in this
opening
community.
statements are.
You have this rare opportunity, it seems to me, to be participants in this search for justice and for truth. And in the final analysis, hopefully by April of this year, I'm optimistic still, you'll be able to render perhaps the most important decision of your lives. And so we want to keep your minds open and fresh so that you can render that decision impartially to both sides, so that people all across the world can say, this system works. This was a fair trial. These were fair people. So thank you in advance again for your service, for the verdict that you're likely to render, and for all the things that you're doing here for us.
Your Honor, the court knows me, and I know Mr. Cochran knows me. I have to interject at this point. This is argument.
Were introductory remarks that were similar in nature to prosecution's opening remarks. I think Mr. Cochran has just concluded his opening remarks.
And I trust so, Your Honor.
That's exactly correct, Your Honor.
And again, I hesitate to interrupt another lawyer's opening statement, but I simply wanted to make sure that this type of statement was ceasing. Thank you, Mr. Cochran.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Idler. I was just about to compliment the District Attorney's Office on their opening statement yesterday. Maybe I'll take that out now. I was about to say they did a thorough job as far as they went. But they're advocates. And all of us, as you will see today, have an obligation to tell you the whole truth of these facts. So in the course of my statement today, let me share with you some of the things they didn't tell you yesterday. And we'll have to wonder why they didn't do that. The evidence in this case, we believe, will show that OJ Simpson is an innocent man, wrongfully accused. Mr. Darden said yesterday that in Richmond, California, and someplace in Georgia, people were asking questions. Well, I'd like to think that in my hometown of Shreveport, Louisiana, my mother-in-law is in New Orleans, Louisiana, and other places throughout this country.
I didn't know Johnny was from Louisiana.
Why did Mr. Darden spend all that time on domestic violence? This is a murder case. Why did he do that? And then when he gave me this answer, he was going to answer the question.
I need a
for all
gavel.
Americans.
Get to the point.
Presumptuous, don't you think? Because the answer of O.J. Simpson's guilt or innocence will only be determined by you if you're able to do it. None of us were out there on June 12, 1994. We can only deal with the witnesses as they were. And it seems to me that this case, the prosecution's case, based on what we heard in the evidence, will show this case is about a rush to judgment, an obsession to win at any cost and by any means necessary. The evidence will show that the prosecution in this case has enlisted the services
We've lost the mic. Where'd you go, Johnny?
that they didn't talk about yesterday and they didn't tell you about. There's a lady who lives next door and works next door to Mr. Simpson's home on Rockingham. This lady was interviewed as far back, I think it's July. She indicated, essentially, that on this night in question, she came out to walk her dog on several occasions. She knew Mr. Simpson. She knew his voice. She knew the Bronco. She'd seen it parked there many times. She will indicate that when she came out and walked her dog at about 8 o'clock, that Bronco was parked at the curb there. It was parked at kind of a unique angle. So that
At 8 o'clock. We know he was at home at 8 o'clock.
And when you go out there, and I think the court will probably share with you, that at some point, you're going to get a chance to go out to each of these scenes to see for yourself these areas. When you come out of the Rockingham gate and you make your turn, the evidence will show it's a quick turn, so you can't land the car quite like you'd like to. But this lady will testify that she was out with her dog and saw that Bronco parked at that particular angle at about 8 o'clock, 8:30 on June 12th,
That it does.
1994, Sunday evening.
That it
She'll
does.
indicate to you that she heard Mr. Simpson's voice at or about the time he and Mr.
They did their
Taylor
job.
went to
Absolutely.
McDonald's to get the hamburger. She could hear, because her quarters are right across the fence there, that after he left, she heard something very strange. She heard a prowler that she described out there in the yard with like hard-soled shoes. And she was concerned about this prowler. That's what her statement was. She relaxed when she heard Mr. Simpson return back, could hear his voice back over in the yard. But she was concerned because the people she works for were out of town at this time. She's concerned about this prowler. We'll talk about that more later. She went about her business, and then she heard Mr. Simpson's voice again about 11 o'clock. She could hear his voice at that time.
Very
because he was
talented.
leaving. We know that's correct because he was leaving to go on a trip to Chicago, a pre-planned trip. And then she didn't hear his voice anymore. But one of the important things that she tells us is that after Mr. Simpson had left, after 11 o'clock, she heard men's voices over on the Simpson property between 12 o'clock up till about 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Could have been Cato.
Heard these men's voices over there talking. She didn't know what was going on. I hope I told you that when she came out to walk her dog at 10:15, that same night, she looked at the Bronco, and the Bronco was parked exactly the same way, at that curb, same way. When she saw the Bronco the next morning, it was parked that same spot, the same place.
Yeah, except did it have blood in it? Did she mention the blood?
And one of the most unique things about this lady is the fact that the morning of June 14th, that Monday morning, a police officer came over to her residence to ask her what she'd heard and to put her on alert that if she found any weapons or if the gardeners found any weapons, to let them know. And she can identify that officer as Detective Mark Furman. Detective Mark Furman will play an integral part in this case for a number of reasons. Now, it's very interesting that the prosecution never once mentioned his name yesterday. It's like they just want to hide him. But they can't hide him. He's very much a part of this case.
I agree.
We can only ask ourselves, why didn't they mention him? I think that answer will become very clear to you as the case progresses. But she will identify
It's a good play, though.
Furman as the person who came over and spoke with her. And she told him at that time about her observations, about hearing this prowler, and about the fact that she heard these voices that went on until about 3 o'clock because she couldn't go to sleep until about 4. And when she woke up, it was like 7:30 or 8. And he was there showing his badge through the door. And she saw him on television at the preliminary hearing. So that's how she could identify him. He said that somebody from the LAPD will get back to you. But they never came back. They never came back at all. Because there's a rush to judgment here. There's another witness, Mary Ann Gerches, very interesting lady, has her own business. On this particular night, in June of 1994, June 12th again, she wanted to find a place in the West Los Angeles, Brentwood area. She drove her car after she closed up her business on Sunday evening and went to Catholic church. Went to Mass, went and parked the car. And she came over there on Monday. Very interesting. Before I tell you what she has to say, let me tell you her contact with law enforcement. The evidence will show that Mary Ann Gerches, after she became aware that what she had seen had some great relevance to this case, started calling the police.
He is very talented.
Kept being transferred around. Couldn't get anybody really to talk to her. Finally, when she finally reached the police officer, they told her,
We'll
"We got
get
that case
into
all
all
wrapped up."
that.
They didn't want to hear from anybody else. And then, lo and behold, she called the district attorney's office. Spoke to a person whose name will be revealed during the testimony. And she didn't feel she was treated quite appropriately. In fact, she will say that the person put her on hold and said, "Excuse me, I'm talking to a psychic right now, and I'll get back to you." I guess it was part of that hotline.
He's
So
talking to Miss
talking to a
Cleo.
psychic, then talking to her. So ultimately, she called the defense. And we talked to her. Walked with her out of the scene. Here's what she will testify about. That on June 12th, 1994, sometime after 10:30 in the evening, she's walking down Bundy. She's looking. It's a warm night, she says. She's looking for places that have signs up to rent or to lease. That Mr. Cole Brown Simpson's condo, you recall, is on one side of the street. That's the west side. And she's on the east side of the street. And at about...
She's looking for places to rent at 10:15 at night?
She sees 4 men who come within 10 feet of her, 2 of which, gentlemen, appear to be Hispanic. I think the other are Caucasian. Several of which I believe have knit caps on their heads. The 2 who are behind apparently have something in their hands they're carrying. She thinks they may be undercover police. She doesn't know. They get into an unmarked car and they speed away, and she sees them. And that's what this lady was trying to tell the police, trying to tell the district attorney, trying to tell anybody who would listen. But they didn't want to listen because they made their decision in this rush to judgment. There are other witnesses that I won't bother you with right now because we'll talk about them later on in the course of the opening statement that bear upon that evening. But I will share just 2 of you because it sets the stage for many of the remarks that Ms. Clark made yesterday. You recall that in her opening statement, quite well done, Ms. Clark kept telling you that she had to fix the time of death in this case at about, what'd she say, about 10:15? She had to make it 10:15, and she made it based upon a dog's wail. Now, this is the first case you'll ever hear where the prosecution's theory is that you've got to determine the cause of the time of death by a dog's wail.
Okay.
And this
I think we've had enough opening statements. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's chat for a couple seconds before I have to go. So, okay. Oh, you guys see my dirty room over here? Right here. I am making some changes. Some changes are coming, so bear with me. This whole side of the room is just a mess right now, but we're getting there. Anyways, with that being said, here's how boy was I wrong. Okay, so here's how we're going to do this from now on. I have to say I do not like landscape streaming and vertical streaming at the same time. So I will not do that again. Do not like it. 10 out of 10, do not recommend. But I think what is fun is doing a Thursday morning stream vertically. So we can like pregame, we can just talk, we can catch up, we can have coffee together. And that way these streams are just business. We can talk about whatever the new news is. And then these streams, we can get into it. What we will be talking about next week is episode 2 of the Netflix documentary, which will be out on Wednesday. But I want to get into some of the testimonies. I've had enough opening trials. So I think what we could do maybe next is I'll look and see when we can watch. We'll watch Mark Furman. Mark Furman's a testimony. I'd love to watch Ron Shipp's testimony. There's some different testimonies that I think we could go through. And I might put those on the, vertical stream. I think I might vertical stream tomorrow in the morning over coffee. And then, yeah. Okay. If you have Netflix, you can watch the first episode. If you don't have Netflix, you can catch up. I made the first episode. It is on my channel. I put it up yesterday. I like the chat ideas too, because the what end abruptly, but make us want to talk about the subject. What? I don't know what that word is. I'm very confused. Anyways. After 4 weeks of this case, we'll be going in. I'll watch the Gabby Petito documentary, and that is what we will do from there. The premieres. Yes. So we'll do morning chats. Other than that, I have to go be a parent. If you guys want, I'll see you guys in the Discord. Thank you for hanging out with me today. And these opening statements, there's something. Yeah. So I appreciate you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. We'll do a verticals live tomorrow morning. Okay, bye.